So now that the ANC has come out in support of calls for a state of disaster to be declared in response to the energy crisis, concerns have been raised about the party's own challenges. The SACP, for one, has called on the ANC to prioritize the needs of the people, while Cosatu is urging the governing party to rid itself of corrupt leaders. Let's continue ventilating the story for you now. Bring in Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Parks. Dr. Alex Mashule with the SCCP is also meant to join us. He'll certainly be part of the discussion as soon as that happens. But for now, Matthew, it's lovely to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. I mean, is it not telling that in the wake of the ANC supporting these calls for a state of disaster to be declared, among the major concerns that South Africans had is that these will open the floodgates to grand-scale looting?
Well, look, it's a correct fear to have, and we must have it. Government must put in place the necessary measures to protect us from it, and it's not an idle fear. We saw what happened in 2020 when the entire nation was focused on managing COVID-19, making sure that everybody who needed them had the PPEs, all the other health and safety measures. Then you had some people who sought to make a quick buck out of it, and sadly, people at the highest levels of the state, the families and the friends. So that is a correct fear, and government needs to take that into account. Put in place the necessary measures to address it. And Eskom is not a virgin land. Eskom's one of its major problems is the endemic corruption from head to toe across Eskom. So that is something which has to be dealt with. But I think our support, while we have, as Cosatu called and asked the president about 2 weeks ago when he met with him, to declare state of disasters for 3 reasons. One is to give a sense to the public at large that government recognizes and has taken this crisis of electricity seriously, giving it the urgency it needs. Because the public doesn't have confidence right now in the state, and we need to take the public along. They need to be given a sense of that there is a plan and there is work being done. The second reason we think is that government itself needs to be woken up. We need to have all government departments, entities, municipalities, institutions, etc., putting all of their efforts in addressing this issue, because it cannot just be simply an Eskom or a public enterprises matter, because local government owes Eskom 56 billion rand. It's got to pay that money. You've got to have the law enforcement agencies, the SAPS, the SIU, the Hawks, the NPA, the courts also dealing with the issues of corruption at Eskom. Eskom can't arrest people. You've got to have Treasury also giving the necessary financial support to Eskom. You need to have mineral resources and energy also giving us policy support, the licensing issues, etc. to Eskom. So I think first that's critical to concentrate government's attention on it. And of course, we also think it's necessary to give government some additional powers in terms of shifting funds to it, shifting personnel, being able to set up rapid response courts, the deployment of law enforcement agencies, etc. So I think for us, it's those three reasons. And we saw that in COVID-19, against all odds, with all of our issues as a country, we did very well as a collective, led by the president and managing it, because we didn't treat COVID-19 as a health department issue. We treated it as a national crisis, where every single person, from the president down to the ordinary mine worker, to the nurse, to the shopkeeper, everybody had a role to play across government departments, and people could be held accountable for it. So for us, it's a necessary intervention, and it's long overdue.
Yeah. You know, speaking about accountability, yesterday, Lukhanya Galata, who's the politics editor here at Newzroom Afrika, was speaking to Fikile Mbalula, who's the Secretary General of the governing party, essentially trying to get to the bottom of whether or not enough accountability has been taken place before we move on to this phase around what the state of disaster would entail. Unlike COVID-19 or the floods we saw mostly in KwaZulu-Natal, those were kind of natural disasters out of our control, and because of that, I think most people were able to kind of coalesce around a particular solution. In this particular case, we can trace to specific decisions that were made or not. And even then, it is the same governing party that is coming forward asking the public to back these calls for a state of disaster. It feels as if the ANC, in some ways, is evading that accountability that needs to take place.
Yeah. So I'm not sure they're evading accountability. We had a meeting with Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General, where he made it quite clear publicly that the ANC has to accept responsibility for this as the governing party. Any blunder that government commits, the ANC must take responsibility for, whether it's accidental rather, or it is intentional by some persons who have committed corruption, etc. I think for us, the most critical part about holding accountability is that those persons at Eskom who have stolen, who have deliberately sabotaged it, including previous CEOs, who deliberately broke Eskom from a world-class institution to an institution of chaos, they need to be held accountable. Not just held accountable in you're an idiot kind of a response, but taken to prison. Because Eskom is a crisis right now because people are stealing from it left, right, and center. You have plant managers who deliberately don't maintain it, who break certain equipment, etc., turn off the switches, so that their brothers can come and get a maintenance contract. You've got inflated supply chain prices being charged to Eskom. It is endemic. There's been about 2,000 forensic audits at Eskom. We need to see action. That's the kind of accountability we want to see, where people are deployed or redeployed to prisons. That's accountability. But I think also critically for us right now, we don't have the luxury of time. We all know what's wrong with Eskom. We know what needs to be done. I think for us it was critical is to see the urgent interventions. We don't agree with the Eskom proposal of a 24-month turnaround plan. We don't have that kind of time as a country. The ANC doesn't have that kind of time as a political party if it wants to win the next elections. We need a 6-month plan where you can see tangible progress each week, each month. But we cannot sustain an economy with 8 to 10 hours of load shedding a day. We made good progress last year getting out of the recession. We're reducing unemployment by 3% in the last 3 quarters. That's going to be just, set back because you're not going to maintain an economy with 10 hours load shedding. Yeah. What restaurant can sell the products? What factory can operate with this kind of load shedding? So government has to treat it with a much greater sense of urgency.
It's definitely untenable. And I suppose part of the questions that will come up is what Cosatu's role is in all of that. I mean, something has to be done for the public at the very least to believe that what you're saying now, what the president has said, what Fikile Mbalula has said, is nothing but lip service.
Yeah. So, I mean, for us as Cosatu, we've been raising the alarm bells on this since 2019. We were quite alarmed in 2019 when the medium-term budget statement was tabled at Parliament by Tito Mboweni that we felt that government was not moving with speed to address the real crisis facing Eskom in the economy, the state, etc. We had drafted Eskom Social Compact as Cosatu. It was signed by government and social partners in Nederland in 2020. There has been some areas of progress. They managed to recover about 5 billion rand of stolen money by Eskom. They managed to, try to rebuild some power stations, shift the focus to maintenance, etc. But none of that can hold water if you're having 10 hours of load shedding a day. I think for us what's critical now is to ramp up the interventions, to focus on the 6 major power stations, the targeted maintenance. But then government needs to give Eskom the support. It has the money to buy the spare parts. Whatever resources Eskom needs, we must give it to them. On the issues of corruption, it's good for Eskom to go and recover 5 billion rand from McKinsey or Bain, etc. But Eskom cannot arrest anybody. So you have to get the NPA and the Hawks, the SIU, the police, the courts to play their role. It cannot be this level of criminality. They have about 11,000 cases of criminal activity instances at Eskom, but only about 83 or so people have been put in prison. So we need to see much more support given to Eskom. And we don't want to hear a situation where you have government speaking with giving multiple responses. Eskom said they need a diesel import licensing, they need additional finances to buy diesel, etc. We should not be quibbling with them. Whatever the issue is, let's sort it out quickly. Let's make sure we move with speed. So we have seen some initial, kind of moving with speed in the past few days from government. We've seen some work being done by the presidency to try to coordinate the issues much better, to get ministers to do what needs to be done, to sign the proclamations that said they need to do. Yeah. That's good. We need to move much faster. But also, I don't think South Africans are unreasonable or impatient or irrational. All they're asking from government is a sense that you take this thing seriously, you have a plan, and to take us through that plan, to say, this week, this is what we're doing, this is the impact. We're going to get so much megawatts on board by this week, and so forth. Because right now, we see PowerPoints, we see grandiose promises, we need to see very concrete action. That's what we saw with COVID-19. And there were many blunders, many mistakes in COVID-19. You can recall the delays in getting the vaccines, etc.
Right.
We fought each other, we boxed each other. Even as Cosatu, we raised the issue sharply with government. But we need to see action right now.
Mm-hmm. And, speaking about public perception, there's, again, what I think is understandable concerns that this moment, this crisis is being used as an electioneering issue. And, in fact, perhaps it's naive to think of it in any other way in some respects. It was always going to feature, given where we are in our political cycle. If the EFF's march next month is anything to go by, if the EFF's march to the Tuli House last month is anything to go by, already we're seeing signs of that take place. I wonder, as an alliance partner of the ANC, how concerned you are that that element may distract the governing party from really addressing what's at the heart of the issue versus pandering to how the gallery in politics, so to speak, will respond.
Yeah. So look, political parties will always do what they need to do to win votes, and that's part of democracy. They'll engage in politics. Nothing you can do about that. I think our concern right now is that you have 10 hours of load shedding a day. We cannot afford to lose a single job. We cannot afford to lose a single company. We can't afford for government to lose the tax revenues that it generates, because those provide for the public services that society, that the economy depend upon. I think that's for us a critical issue. But look, engaging politics, and we've raised it quite sharply with the president of the ANC, and I think they agree. There is no political party which is ruling which can survive an election where the economy has 10 hours of load shedding a day. So it's in the ANC's own interest, and it's in society's interest that the ANC deals with the issue. Because if not, society would deal with the ANC very harshly, unfortunately, in elections. We don't want to see that happening as an ally of the ANC. We think there's many good things they have done and many good things they need to do, etc. But I think for us, it's an election can be a useful thing to keep politicians in the backside sometimes when they need to move at greater speed. That's the nature. That's how society holds political parties accountable, because if you don't hold them accountable, you don't threaten them with a spanking in the next elections. And of course, political parties will go into a slumber. And unfortunately, I think that's partly why we're in a crisis, because at times, ministers, departments, municipalities, mayors, premiers, they sleepwalk through life. And then they realize a year before elections that, hey, we're in a problem here. Unfortunately, we don't have the time or space to quibble. We need to fix ESCOM. We need to give ESCOM all the support it requires to get things moving again.
Hopefully, it'll eventually manifest. Matthew Parks, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Matthew Parks is Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator. Thanks very much indeed.